Hello and welcome to the last edition of Let's Talk Criterion for the month of November. And in this edition, we'll be taking a look at the long-awaited addition to the collection. It's Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut, coming to the collection on 4K UHD. I won't be able to bring anything of much revelation to the table on director Stanley Kubrick, as it's all been done before. So I'll take you through a brief history of this visionary director. Compared to other directors, he made comparatively few films in his long career. Just 13 in fact. He had started out as a photographer for Look magazine in the late 1940s, early 1950s. He made Fear and Desire and Killer's Kiss in 1955 and The Killing in 1956. Not long after, he made Paths of Glory, beginning his friendship with Kirk Douglas, in a collaboration spanning two films they made, Paths of Glory and Spartacus, of course, in 1960. Lolita came 2 years later, in 1962, his retelling of the Nabokov novel. In 1964 came Dr. Strangelove, a longer break then, whilst he prepped and worked with novelist Arthur C. Clarke to bring his best-selling book 2001: A Space Odyssey to the screen, which premiered to a bewildered mainstream audience in 1968. But still, of course, one of the best sci-fi films ever made. The gaps between Stanley's films began to extend as he did extensive research before making a film. A Clockwork Orange, for instance, hit screens in 1971, causing him to take out of distribution in cinemas because of it sparking copycat violence and death threats to him. The massive period epic Barry Lyndon came to be in 1975, and this, of course, has had a recent stunning 4K release in the collection. Then in 1980, he took Stephen King's bestseller, The Shining, and gave us a chilling adaptation of it with a powerful lead performance by Jack Nicholson. In 1987, he shot in the UK for his Vietnam War film, Full Metal Jacket, hailed as one of the best war movies ever made. And then there was a much longer break, before Eyes Wide Shut released in 1999. It's adapted from the novella by Austrian writer Arthur Schnitzler, a Traumnovelle, dream story. Now, the story concerned the thoughts and psychological transformations of Dr. Fridolin over a 2-day period after his wife confesses having had sexual fantasies involving another man. Now, the casting for Kubrick had always been vitally important for him, as he demonstrated in many of his previous films. But Warner Brothers president Terry Semel asked him to cast movie stars in the film rather than newcomers. He had been watching Tom Cruise mature as a young actor and chose him to play Dr. Bill Harford, married to Nicole Kidman as Alice Harford. Of course, Tom and Nicole were actually married at that time, so that made the relationship in the film feel even more grounded. Now, Stanley had moved to the UK in the late 70s with his wife and children, and he sent his trusted assistant to scout and take photographs of Greenwich Village in New York so they could be recreated at Pinewood Studios in the UK. When many watch Tom Cruise walking the New York streets, it's not apparent, of course, it's on a movie set. This was mainly because Kubrick had a fear of flying, and he wouldn't leave the UK. Kubrick considered making the Dream Story adaptation a sex comedy with a wild and sombre streak running through it. He planned to have either Steve Martin or Woody Allen in the main role. Kubrick also considered using Tom Hanks, Bill Murray, Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, Albert Brooks, Alan Alda and Sam Shepard for the lead as well in the 80s. I think we're all very pleased he didn't go that route. Now, the plot for the film centres on a doctor, Tom Cruise, of course, who is shocked when his wife, Nicole Kidman, reveals that she had contemplated cheating on him the previous summer. Now, he then embarks on a night-long adventure, during which he infiltrates a masked orgy of a secret society. Now, of course, like any other Kubrick film, there is much more than that beneath the surface of this tale. It's never actually implied, though, that jealousy is purely what drives the husband to try and cheat, but that this event, his wife's confession of longing, has appeared and disrupted his seemingly stable and happy life. Now, this particular guy is straight-laced to the T. He runs his own medical practice. He has a beautiful wife and daughter, upmarket city apartment, wealthy circle of friends, and he's a living candidate for sleepwalking through life, a naive illusion of stability. Hence the title of the film, Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick does something crafty here. By cutting to the black and white images of Kidman rolling around in bed with the naval officer, he misleads the audience into thinking that the sexual act or fantasy of the sexual act is primarily what's bothering Bill Harford. But of course, it's more nuanced than that. Now, in his prologue to Schnitzler's book, the film screenwriter, that's Frederick Raphael, asserts that the confession scene in the bedroom is meant to symbolise a therapy session. For instance, the wife is like the blubbering patient, and the husband is the quiet, attentive listener. Only it's turned on its head. Instead of coming to a breakthrough, her confession instead creates a trauma in the husband's mind. And in this instance, the therapist is the one who goes a little mad. And before he can heal the mental wound by talking about it with her, the opportunity is interrupted by the maid, in the film of course, by a phone call, ushering the husband to the house of his patient. Henceforth, he gets caught in a kind of loop, where unconsciously and uncannily he repeatedly has near sexual encounters which mirror his wife's fantasy of the missed opportunity. Apparently, this is a very real phenomena that was explored by the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud and the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, and it would later, of course, coin réputation compulsion, and that which is forgotten tends to be repeated unconsciously, according to Freud. Now, equating the couple's dreams and fantasies with waking life as equally important is also typical Freud. And then, of course, there's the themes of death and sex, which are continually being contrasted with each other throughout the film. Each one is worth its own essay, really. It's all very fascinating, but to its own detriment, this film isn't at all accessible to those who aren't familiar with, or indeed interested in, psychology, early 20th century psychoanalytical archetypes. Kubrick obviously knew this, so he cast Hollywood's sexiest couple in the leads and jazzed up the film's promotional material, probably in the hopes that it would make the film more approachable for mainstream audiences, especially American audiences. Paranoia and the uncanny being a popular theme at the time. Now, Kubrick determined Bill should be a Harrison Fordish guy and created the surname of Harford as an allusion to the actor. In the film, Bill's taunted with homophobic slurs, but in the novella, the taunters are actually members of an anti-Semitic college fraternity. Now, in an introduction to the Penguin Classics edition of Dream Story, Raphael, the screenwriter, wrote that Fridolin is not declared to be a Jew, but his feelings of cowardice for failing to challenge his aggressor echo the uneasiness of Austrian Jews in the face of Gentile provocation. And the novella is set during the carnival, when people often wear masks to parties. And the party that both husband and wife attend at the opening of the story is a carnival masquerade ball, whereas in the film, of course, the story begins at Christmas time. In the novella, the party, which is sparsely attended, uses Denmark as the password for entrance. Now that is significant in that the character Albertina had her infatuation with a soldier in Denmark, and the film's password, of course, is Fidelio. Now, in early drafts of the screenplay, the password was actually Fidelio Rainbow. Jonathan Rosenbaum noted that both passwords echo elements of one member of the couple's behaviour, although in opposite ways. The party in the novella consists mostly of nude ballroom dancing, where of course we have a full-on sex orgy in the film. Now, of course, the mask has been used before in film, depicted as a form of concealment when people are about to engage in promiscuous activity. And that sequence is where Kubrick excels, with his use of red and the vocals, of course, sung in reverse, giving it a strange, satanic feel. Now, music was also very important to Kubrick. Jocelyn Pook wrote the original music for Eyes Wide Shut, but like other Kubrick movies, the film was noted for its use of classical music. For instance, the opening title music is Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2 from Suite for Variety Stage Orchestra, misidentified as Jazz Suite No. 2. One recurring piece is the second movement of Gheorghe Ligeti's piano cycle Musica Risacata. Now, of course, Kubrick had used Ligeti's music extensively in his film 2001 and other classical composers like Bach and Beethoven in A Clockwork Orange. Other track in the orgy, called Migrations, features a Tamil song. This is sung by Manikim Yogiswaran, now a Carnatic singer. The original cut featured a scriptural recitation from the Bhagavad Gita, which Pook took from a previous Yogiswaran recording. South African Hindu Mahasabha, a Hindu group, protested against the scripture being used. Now, Warner Brothers issued a public apology here and hired the singer to record a similar track to replace the chant. Now, principal photography for Eyes Wide Shut began in November 1996. Yes, 3 years before it was released. Kubrick's perfectionism led to script pages being rewritten on the set itself, and he intentionally filmed many scenes multiple times to try to break down the actors involved and have them give a more authentic performance. One scene of Cruise walking through a door was filmed 95 times, and as a result, the shoot went on for much longer than anyone expected. The actress Vanessa Shaw was initially contracted for just 2 weeks and one scene, but she ended up working for 2 months. Now, due to the relentless nature of the production, the crew became exhausted and were reported to have been impacted by low morale. And Tom Cruise himself developed an ulcer, but didn't tell Kubrick about it. Now, of course, this edition of Let's Talk Criterion is too short to fully analyse Eyes Wide Shut, and I won't even attempt to do that. The supporting cast consists of Sidney Pollack, a director himself, of course, as Victor Ziegler, Marie Richardson as Marion Nathanson, Radu Serbeja as Mr. Milic, Todd Field as Nick Nightingale, Vanessa Shaw as Domino, Alan Cumming as Hotel Desk Clerk, Sky Dumont as Zandor Zavost, Faye Masterson as Sally, Lily Sobieski as Milic's daughter, Thomas Gibson as Carl Thomas, Madison Egginton as Helena Harford, Julianne Davis as Mandy Curran, Gary Goba as the naval officer, Abigail Good as the mysterious woman, and Leon Vitali as Red Cloak. And we have the uncredited voice of Kate Blanchett as the mysterious woman. Shortly after completing Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick passed away in his home in England, making this his last completed film. He had a project that he had been also working on called AI, and he entrusted this to his close personal friend Steven Spielberg, who later, of course, made it into a film, AI, Artificial Intelligence. Now, this once again proved that Kubrick was always looking ahead, and indeed, had he made the film himself, it would certainly have been interesting and thought-provoking and probably much darker. Eyes Wide Shut has gone down as a Kubrick classic, and one that indeed remains high up on the list with critics across the world. It comes to the collection with a 4K digital restoration of the international version of the film, supervised and approved by the director of photography Larry Smith, with 5.1 surround DTS HD master audio soundtrack. And it comes as a 4K UHD disc and a Blu-ray disc with the film and the following special features. New interviews with Smith, set decorator and second unit director Lisa Leone, and archivist Georgina Orgel. Archival interview with Criterion Kubrick, director Stanley Kubrick's wife. Never Just a Dream from 2019, featuring interviews with producer Jan Harlan, Katarina Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick's daughter, and Antony Fruin, Kubrick's personal assistant. Lost Kubrick, the unfinished films of Stanley Kubrick from 2007. Kubrick Remembered from 2014, featuring interviews with actors Todd Field and Lily Sobieski and filmmaker Steven Spielberg. Kubrick's 1998 acceptance speech for the Directors Guild of America's D.W. Griffith Award. Press conference for the film from 1999, featuring Harlan and actors Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. Teaser, trailer and promos, and an essay written by the author Megan Abbott, and a 1999 interview with filmmaker and actor Sidney Pollack. And the cover art is based on an original poster by Katarina Kubrick and Criterion Kubrick. Released in 1999, the film also serves as a fitting coda to a century of cinema by one of its greatest visionaries, an endlessly tantalising labyrinth whose myriad symbols, mysteries and meanings are still being unravelled today. Eyes Wide Shut has a running time of 159 minutes, with an aspect ratio of 185:1, and it comes to the collection on 4K UHD and Blu-ray as Spine 1290. And just before I end this edition, there's been much talk recently in the forums about this restoration, and all I can say here is that had Leon Vitali still been alive, he would have undoubtedly supervised this restoration, as he was most conversant on what would have been closest to Kubrick's original artistic intention here. But Larry Smith should be well qualified to judge in Vitali's absence. The primary lenses used for Eyes Wide Shut were a set of Zeiss Super Speed T1.3 spherical prime lenses, often the 18mm length, and other lenses included Ari's variable prime lenses, and for some shots, a Cooke Varietal 20 to 100mm zoom lens was used. This 4K is an excellent presentation, and it has a more contemporary look to it, with softer images. Next week on Let's Talk Criterion, we'll be taking a look at the Blu-ray release of Return to Reason, 4 films by Man Ray, coming to the collection in early December. So until then, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.